I can't believe it.
I'm here. We're here.
Billionaire husband abandoned her during childbirth, but his cousin and trusted business partner secretly became the father of her twins. He left her in the hospital, broken and alone. His cousin stepped in, not just as a partner, but as the father her children deserved. Years later, when the truth finally comes to light, the question remains, who really owns her heart? This is not a story of defeat, it's a story of healing. A story of second chances, of love born in unlikely places, and of a woman who discovered her true strength in the man who chose to stay when everyone else walked away. This is redemption. This is resilience. This is love so unshakable, no critic, no whisper, no betrayal could ever tear it apart. But before we begin, family, I want to ask you, do you believe true love is about who finds you first, or who stays when it matters most? Can betrayal ever become the doorway to a stronger, more lasting love? And if you were Amara, could you ever forgive such abandonment, or would the wound remain forever? And as we listen together, let me pray over this family right now. May you never be abandoned in your darkest hour. May the people who stand by you be loyal in storms, not just in sunshine. May every scar you carry become proof of survival, not symbols of shame. May love reach you in the most unexpected places and silence every critic who doubted your worth. And may our journey as a family be filled with peace, healing, and joy everlasting. Amen. Now, family, share with us in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? Are you joining us from the US, the UK, Canada, Germany, or tuning in from across Africa and Asia? Let's celebrate this global family coming together. And if stories like this move your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We pour our hearts into these stories, and it's your support, family, that keeps this journey alive and growing. The Hale Mansion was a palace of glass and marble, a fortress of wealth perched above the city like a crown. Its halls echoed with quiet luxury, the low hum of the air system, the faint scent of lavender polish on mahogany floors, the glow of chandeliers reflecting in spotless windows. And yet, to Amara, it was the loneliest place on earth. She stood in the nursery, one hand resting on her swollen belly, the other tracing the carved edge of a snow-white crib. The nursery was perfect, too perfect, as if designed for a magazine spread rather than for two babies who would soon need warmth, mess, and love. The crib was lined with soft blankets, one blush pink, one powder blue. She had chosen them herself, late one evening after Adrian told her he was too busy to come with her. He had been in Hong Kong that week, securing another merger that meant millions more in his empire. She had walked through the baby store alone, under the pitying gaze of mothers with husbands who carried the bags, who argued over stroller colors, who held their wives' hands. Amara lowered herself into the rocking chair, pressing her palm harder against her stomach as another contraction rippled through her. It wasn't the first, but it was stronger. Too strong. Her phone sat on the dresser beside her. She kept glancing at it, the screen dark, waiting for it to light up with his name. She had texted Adrian 3 times since morning. Amara, contractions are starting. They might not be regular yet, but I'm scared. Amara, where are you? Amara, please come home tonight. I need you. The messages were marked red. No reply. She closed her eyes, fighting the sting of tears. She didn't want to cry again. She had cried enough in this house to fill its marble bathtubs. Just a little longer, she whispered to the babies, rubbing her belly. He'll come. He has to. But the silence was heavy. Across the city, Adrian Hale leaned back in a leather chair, the skyline glittering behind him like diamonds spilled across black velvet. The boardroom smelled faintly of cigars and old money. He was the kind of man who owned a room without raising his voice. Close the deal, he said, his tone clipped, decisive. We don't wait for anyone." The men at the table nodded, scribbling notes as if he had spoken scripture. Adrian glanced at his watch, a gold Patek Philippe, a gift he had bought for himself after the last acquisition. Time was money. Time was power. Time was not to be wasted. His phone buzzed. He flicked it over with a glance. Amara. Again. He read her message. Contractions. Fear. Pleading. A muscle twitched in his jaw. He slipped the phone back into his jacket pocket and looked up at the board. "Gentlemen, if we delay, we lose 10 million in interest alone," he said smoothly. "I trust no one here wants to explain that to our shareholders." Laughter rippled through the room. Adrian smiled thinly. His world was numbers, leverage, dominance. Emotion had no place here. His wife would manage. She always did. At the far end of the boardroom table sat Daniel Hale, Adrian's cousin and most trusted business partner. Daniel was quieter, his presence less commanding but steady, reliable. Where Adrian was sharp edges and steel, Daniel was calm waters and patience. He rarely spoke unless necessary, but when he did, people listened. As Adrian's voice cut across the room, Daniel's thoughts drifted. He had seen the flicker of Amara's name on Adrian's phone. He had seen the way Adrian dismissed it, slipping the phone away as if it were nothing more than an inconvenience. Daniel clenched his jaw, forcing himself to look down at the reports in front of him. But his mind betrayed him. It painted an image of her, Amara, sitting in that grand house, waiting, her hand on her belly, her eyes filled with hope that had long been abandoned by the man she married. He should not think of her. He had no right. She was Adrian's wife, not his. But still, the thought burned. Back at the mansion, dusk fell slowly. The nursery glowed with soft lamplight. Amara had tried to distract herself by folding tiny clothes, stacking diapers, checking hospital bags. But another contraction hit, sharp and insistent. She gasped, gripping the edge of the dresser. The babies shifted, one kicking hard beneath her ribs. She sank into the rocking chair again, her phone clutched tight. She dialed him this time. It rang once, twice, then voicemail. His voice, smooth and commanding even in a recording. "This is Adrian Hale. Leave a message." She closed her eyes. "Adrian, please. I think it's starting. I don't want to do this alone." Her voice broke. "Please just come home." She ended the call, pressing the phone to her chest. A moment later, it buzzed. Relief surged, until she saw the message. "Adrian, in a meeting. Don't dramatize. You'll be fine." Her throat tightened. Fine. He thought she would be fine. Another contraction made her double over, clutching the chair. Sweat broke across her forehead. She breathed through it, whispering, "You'll be fine. You'll be fine." But her voice trembled. She stared at the empty doorway, the silence pressing in. He wasn't coming. Later that night, Adrian stood at the bar of a private club, glass of scotch in hand. Around him, laughter and conversation flowed. His colleagues congratulated him on the deal. He smiled, his charm flawless. One of them clapped him on the shoulder. "Big day tomorrow, eh? Twins on the way. You must be excited." Adrian's smile didn't falter. "Of course. A legacy, isn't it? Every empire needs heirs." Inside, a flicker of discomfort stirred, quickly smothered. He didn't have time for weakness. Women exaggerated these things. Labor lasted hours, sometimes days. She would be fine. Doctors would handle it. That was what he paid them for. He ordered another drink. Daniel left the club early. He told himself it was because he had work to review, but in truth, He couldn't stomach watching Adrian laugh while Amara suffered. In the privacy of his car, he sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. His phone was in his pocket. He had her number. He could check on her. Just one call. But loyalty bound him. Adrian was his blood, his family. Betrayal was unthinkable. And yet, he drove home in silence, the city lights blurring past, his chest heavy with a guilt he didn't fully understand. The contractions came closer now, sharper, stealing her breath. Amara paced the nursery, one hand braced against her back, the other clutching her phone. She tried to call again. Straight to voicemail. Her eyes stung, tears spilling before she could stop them. "You promised me, Adrian," she whispered into the empty room. "You promised you'd be here." The twins kicked restlessly, as if echoing her pain. She sank to her knees beside the crib, her forehead pressed against its cold wooden bars. The nursery that had once felt like hope now felt like a cage. And in that moment, as the night deepened and her husband laughed with colleagues miles away, Amara realized a truth that hollowed her. She was already alone. The storm began with a whisper. Amara had fallen asleep in the rocking chair, her head tipped against the cushion, one hand draped protectively over her stomach. The nursery was dim now, the lamplight soft, shadows stretching across the walls painted with golden stencils of stars. She had dreamed of voices, laughter, crying, her husband's baritone murmuring her name. But it was not laughter that woke her. It was pain. A contraction tore through her body, sharp, relentless. She gasped awake, clutching her belly. The air left her lungs in a ragged cry. The clock on the wall read 2:07 a.m. She reached for her phone, her hand trembling. She dialed Adrian again. The line rang once, twice, then, "The number you are trying to reach is unavailable." Her vision blurred with tears. She pressed a hand to her stomach, whispering to the babies, "Not yet. Please, not yet." Another contraction came, harder, pulling a sob from her throat. She couldn't do this alone. She dialed again, desperation in her shaking hands. Voicemail. She left a message between breaths. "Adrian, please. I need you. It's happening. I can't do this alone. Please pick up." She ended the call and pressed the phone to her chest. Silence pressed back. At the same moment, Adrian Hale was seated in the back of a sleek black limousine, glass of whiskey in his hand. The city blurred by in neon streaks. He had left the club hours later than planned, having secured promises of investment and whispered admiration from men who envied him. His phone buzzed once in his pocket. He glanced at it. Amara again. A flicker of irritation crossed his face. He slid the phone away, ignoring it. "Women," he muttered under his breath, sipping the whiskey. "Always dramatic." His driver glanced in the rearview mirror, but wisely said nothing. Adrian leaned back, his mind already spinning through tomorrow's agenda. Meetings, signatures, strategy. His empire was his true child, one that demanded every ounce of his time. The twins would be there tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. He would hold them, smile for the cameras, and then return to his real work. For now, the world was his, and he would not be pulled away. Across the city, Daniel lay awake in his apartment. His room was dark, save for the faint light spilling in through the blinds. He had tried to sleep, but unease gnawed at him. He had seen the way Adrian ignored her calls. He had seen the unread messages piling up on his cousin's phone. And he had seen Amara in his mind, sitting alone, waiting, scared. He rolled over, staring at the ceiling. His phone sat on the nightstand, glowing faintly with the time. He picked it up, thumb hovering over her contact. Should he call? Just to check if she was all right? No. He dropped the phone back onto the table with a sharp exhale. He couldn't. It wasn't his place. Adrian was her husband. He had sworn loyalty to family, to blood. But the unease wouldn't fade. It pressed against his chest, heavy, insistent. The contractions grew closer now, less than 10 minutes apart. Amara tried to stand, but her legs shook beneath her. She gripped the edge of the crib, her knuckles white. She wanted to scream, but the mansion swallowed sound. There was no one to hear her. She shuffled down the hall, her breath ragged, making her way to the grand staircase. The house seemed endless, the marble floors cold beneath her bare feet. She reached the kitchen, fumbling for her phone again. This time, she didn't call Adrian. She called the driver. "Mrs. Hale," his voice answered, groggy but alert. "Please, I need to get to the hospital," she gasped, another contraction bending her in half. It's time." And yet the thought of leaving her, of leaving them, was unbearable. He turned back. Amara looked at him, her eyes heavy with exhaustion and sorrow. The twins stirred softly against her chest. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice weak. I couldn't have done this alone." Daniel swallowed hard. Words swelled in his throat, words he had buried for years. "I've loved you since before he did." But he forced them down, burying them deeper still. "Instead," he nodded. "You'll never be alone," he said softly. Her gaze lingered on him, as if she sensed something beneath his words, but she was too tired to question it. She drifted into sleep, her arms still wrapped around the twins. Daniel watched her for a long time, his chest heavy with a vow he could never speak. "If he won't protect you, I will. If he won't love you, I will." The next morning, Adrian finally arrived at the hospital. He entered the room in a tailored suit, the scent of expensive cologne preceding him. A bouquet of roses dangled carelessly in his hand. Amara stirred awake, her eyes bleary. The twins lay in the crib beside her, their tiny chests rising and falling. Adrian smiled faintly, rehearsed. "So they're here." Her throat tightened. "Where were you?" He placed the flowers on the table with a shrug. "Meetings. You know how it is. I came as soon as I could." Her heart clenched. "As soon as you could? Adrian, I begged for you. I screamed for you." His expression hardened. "You survived. They survived. That's what matters." Her tears spilled. "You weren't there. Do you even care?" Adrian's gaze flicked to the twins. "They're beautiful. Perfect for the press release." The words cut her deeper than any blade. She turned her face away, biting back a sob. Daniel, who had been standing silently in the corner, clenched his fists. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Not yet. The fracture was complete. Amara knew, deep in her hollowed chest, that the man she had married was gone, or perhaps had never been who she thought he was. The twins slept peacefully, unaware of the storm around them. Daniel lingered at the bedside, silent, steady, the only anchor in her chaos. And Adrian Hale, the billionaire husband who had abandoned her in the hour she needed him most, left the hospital minutes later, his phone already pressed to his ear, talking about markets and contracts. Amara lay in the hospital bed, clutching her children, a tear sliding down her cheek. She had been abandoned. But perhaps, she was not entirely alone. If you were Amara, would you keep holding on to the hope that Adrian will change, or would you already start questioning the very foundation of your marriage? Share your thoughts below. They might resonate with someone else who's been in her shoes. The Hale mansion gleamed under the autumn sun, but inside, its corridors felt colder than the hospital walls Amara had just left behind. She stepped through the front doors slowly, her body still tender from labor, the weight of her two tiny infants filling her arms. Two nurses trailed behind, carrying bags and formula samples the hospital had provided. The scent of polished marble and roses from the oversized vase in the foyer was overwhelming. Adrian wasn't there. He had texted that he'd be held up at the office and would check in later. Her lips pressed into a thin line as she rocked the twins gently, her chest hollow. This was supposed to be their homecoming, a family's beginning. Yet, the silence of the house echoed louder than any welcome. The twins whimpered softly, their tiny sounds bouncing off the high ceilings. "Let's get you settled," Amara whispered, her voice hoarse. Hours later, the twins were finally asleep in the nursery. The pale blue walls had been painted months ago, long before Adrian began pulling away from her. Tiny golden stars dotted the ceiling, glowing faintly. She had picked them out herself, imagining how she and Adrian would stand together here, whispering lullabies. But he hadn't even seen the nursery in daylight. Amara sank into the rocking chair, exhaustion pressing heavy on her bones. Her stitches ached, her body fragile, but worse than the physical pain was the void pressing against her chest. The door creaked softly. She glanced up. Daniel stepped inside, carrying a small bag. He looked hesitant, as if intruding, though he'd been the one to drive her home when Adrian had sent his driver instead. "I brought some things," he murmured, lifting the bag slightly. "Diapers, blankets, the essentials. Thought it might help." Her throat tightened. "Thank you." Their eyes held for a moment too long before she turned back to the twins. It was past midnight when Adrian finally returned. Amara was in the bedroom, trying to breastfeed the babies, her eyes heavy-lidded, hair falling out of its bun. Adrian strode in, his tie loosened, his phone pressed to his ear. He glanced at the twins briefly, then at her. His lips curved faintly, but the gesture felt hollow. "Yes, I'll finalize it tomorrow," he said into the phone, pacing. "Send the papers to Daniel." He ended the call and tossed the phone onto the dresser. "They look well," he said, as though commenting on a business report. Her jaw tightened. "They're your children, Adrian." "They're heirs," he corrected smoothly, walking over to pour himself a drink. The sound of clinking ice filled the silence. "And they'll have everything they need." Her chest burned. Except their father. He stilled, glass in hand, then turned. "I provide in the ways that matter. You knew who you married." Her hands trembled as she adjusted her son against her chest. "I thought I married a man who'd stand beside me. Who'd hold me when I was breaking. Who'd care enough to show up." His eyes flicked away, the faintest hint of discomfort passing through him, but it was gone in seconds. He sipped his drink. "You're overreacting. You're tired. Rest. The staff can handle the rest." She bit her lip to keep from sobbing. The next morning, Amara awoke to the faint sound of humming. She pushed herself up, wincing at the ache in her body, and followed the sound. In the nursery, Daniel stood over the crib, gently rocking her daughter. The baby's tiny hand clutched his finger, her cries fading into soft hiccups. Amara's breath caught. He looked up at her, startled, as though caught doing something forbidden. "She wouldn't settle," he said quietly. "I didn't want to wake you." Her throat closed. "You stayed." He hesitated, then nodded. "I couldn't leave. Not when you needed rest." Her eyes burned. She walked closer, her hand brushing the crib rail. For a moment, they both stood in silence, watching the baby drift into sleep. Daniel's voice was low when he finally spoke. "They're perfect. And they deserve more than silence." Her lips trembled. She wanted to thank him, but the words felt too small for what he had given her: presence. Days blurred into nights. Adrian came and went, his visits brief, his words measured. He asked about meetings more than milestones, about boardroom votes more than the baby's first smiles. Amara felt herself fading, her world shrinking to the nursery, to midnight feedings, to whispered lullabies. But Daniel was there. Quietly, steadfastly. He brought groceries when she forgot to order. He fixed the broken latch on the nursery window. He held the twins when her arms were too weak to go on. Every glance between them carried weight. Not spoken, not confessed, but there. One evening, as she sat nursing her son, she found Daniel watching her from the doorway. His gaze softened, reverent, before he quickly looked away. Her heart stuttered. She told herself it was nothing, that she was imagining it. But in the quiet of the night, when Adrian's side of the bed remained cold and untouched, the thought returned. It happened on a rain-soaked Thursday. The storm rattled the windows, thunder cracking overhead. Both twins were crying, their tiny voices merging into a desperate wail. Amara tried to rock them both, but her body trembled with exhaustion. Her knees buckled. She sank onto the nursery chair, her tears spilling. Daniel appeared in the doorway, his shirt damp from the rain. Without a word, he crossed the room, lifting her daughter gently from her arms. "I've got her," he said, his voice steady. He cradled the baby against his chest, humming low, his warmth radiating like a shield against the storm. The cries softened. Amara stared at him through blurred vision. Her son quieted in her own arms, lulled by her heartbeat. The room grew still again, filled only with the storm outside. Her eyes met Daniel's. Something flickered there, raw, unspoken, undeniable. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was the spark of something forbidden, something that made her chest ache in ways both terrifying and alive. She swallowed hard and looked away, rocking her son. But the air between them was changed forever. Later that night, after the twins had fallen asleep, Amara lingered in the nursery. Daniel had already gone, leaving only the faint scent of rain behind. She touched the crib rail, her heart racing. For the first time in weeks, she felt seen. Not as a burden, not as an accessory to Adrian's empire, but as a woman, as a mother, as someone worth standing beside. And it terrified her. Because the man who had been there when her world fell apart wasn't her husband. He was her husband's cousin. And the line between gratitude and something deeper had begun to blur. The long dining table stretched out like a cold runway of polished oak and crystal. Amara sat near one end, her daughter cradled against her shoulder, her son dozing in the bassinet beside her chair. The seat at the head of the table, Adrian's seat, remained empty. The roast chicken on the silver platter was already cooling. The staff had retreated, their faces politely neutral, but Amara could feel their unspoken pity. Another evening of absence. She forced a breath and turned her gaze back to the twins. Her lips brushed her daughter's soft hair, and she whispered, "It's okay. Mummy's here." The sound of footsteps echoed. She looked up. Daniel entered the room, his jacket folded over one arm, his shirt sleeves rolled back slightly. He stopped when he saw her sitting alone, then glanced at the untouched food and the empty chair at the table's head. His jaw tightened. "He didn't come," Daniel said quietly. "Not a question." Amara shook her head. "He said there was a late call with investors." Again. Daniel set his jacket down on the nearest chair and came closer, his eyes softening as he looked at the twins. "Mind if I—" She hesitated, then nodded. He lifted her son gently from the bassinet, cradling him as if he'd done it 1,000 times before. The baby stirred but didn't cry, his tiny mouth twitching in sleep. Amara's throat thickened. Daniel looked so natural holding him, as though he'd been waiting his whole life for the chance. They ate together, though the food was barely touched. Amara picked at her plate, exhaustion dragging her shoulders down. Daniel coaxed her into at least sipping the soup, while he held the baby in the crook of his arm. "This feels wrong," she whispered finally, her voice carrying the weight of her shame. "Sitting here like this, with you instead of him." Daniel's eyes flicked up to hers, steady. "What feels wrong is him not being here at all." The words lodged in her chest. She looked away, blinking rapidly as tears gathered. The silence stretched, but it wasn't empty. It was full of the things neither dared to say aloud. When the twins were finally asleep in the nursery, Amara lingered in the doorway. Daniel stood beside the crib, watching over them like a guardian carved from patience. "You don't have to stay," she said softly. "I know." He didn't move. "But I want to." Later that night, as the rain tapped softly against the nursery windows, Amara found herself unable to sleep. She slipped into the library, the glow of the fireplace warming the shadows. She hadn't expected Daniel to be there. Yet he was, leaning against the mantel, a glass of water in hand. He straightened when he saw her. "You should be resting," he said gently. She shrugged, drawing her robe tighter around her. "Rest doesn't come easy anymore." He nodded, understanding flickering in his gaze. They stood in silence, the crackle of the fire filling the room. And then, unbidden, a memory rose in Amara's mind. The first night she had met Adrian, a gala, golden light spilling across the ballroom. Adrian had swept her into his orbit with his charm, his intensity. But in the corner of the room, she remembered, Daniel had been there too, watching. His eyes had held something different. Something steadier. Her lips parted slightly as the realization struck her like a delayed echo. She looked at him now, the firelight painting his features in amber. "You knew me before Adrian introduced us, didn't you?" Daniel's jaw tightened. For a moment, he didn't answer. Then quietly, "Yes." Her breath caught. "Why didn't you say anything?" His gaze lowered to the floor, his thumb tracing the edge of the glass he held. "Because he moved faster. Because he wanted you, and he always got what he wanted. And because he trailed off, swallowing hard." Her heart thudded painfully. "Because what?" His eyes lifted to hers at last. The weight in them nearly stole her breath. "Because if I had told you how I felt back then, I would have lost him. And maybe you. And I wasn't willing to risk either." The fire crackled, filling the silence that followed. Amara's lips trembled. Her heart twisted with something she didn't want to name. She had thought Daniel's devotion was born of loyalty, of duty. But now she realized, it was older, deeper. He set the glass down abruptly, turning away as though afraid of what else might slip from his tongue. "You should get some rest," he said, his voice strained. Amara stood frozen, her mind spinning. The weight of his unsaid words lingered in the room long after he left. The next morning, Adrian breezed into the nursery with a smile that looked rehearsed. He kissed Amara on the cheek perfunctorily before crouching near the twins' crib. "They'll photograph well," he said lightly. "A boy and a girl. The perfect family image. Investors love that sort of balance." Amara's stomach turned. "They're not assets, Adrian." "They're heirs," he corrected smoothly, straightening. "And heirs are the greatest assets." Daniel, who had been fixing the crib's mobile, stiffened. His hands froze on the tiny golden stars. Amara's chest constricted. She wanted to scream, but her voice caught. She only managed a whisper. "Do you even love them?" Adrian's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Then it returned, sharper this time. "Love is overrated, Amara. Legacy isn't." The air between them thickened, brittle with unshed fury. Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, muttered something about a meeting, and walked out. Silence swallowed the nursery once more. Amara clutched the edge of the crib, her knuckles white. She felt Daniel's eyes on her, steady, protective. When she turned, the storm of her emotions threatened to spill over. She didn't cry. Not yet. But her silence screamed louder than tears. That night, the twins woke crying at the same time again. Amara stumbled into the nursery, her body screaming for rest, her arms aching. Daniel was already there, shirt untucked, tie discarded. He rocked her daughter gently, humming under his breath. "Go back to bed," he murmured when she entered. "I've got them." Her throat burned. She leaned against the doorframe, exhaustion pulling her down. "Why are you doing this, Daniel? You don't have to." He looked at her then, and something raw flickered in his eyes. "Because someone should." Her lips parted, her chest rising and falling too fast. In that moment, she realized the truth. Daniel wasn't just stepping in because Adrian had failed. He was stepping in because he had always wanted to. The air between them pulsed with unspoken words, heavy and fragile. She turned quickly, retreating down the hall before she could betray herself. But the spark had been struck, and there was no undoing it. Amara lay awake long after, staring at the ceiling. Her husband slept elsewhere again, probably in his study, lost in stock reports and mergers. But her mind was not on Adrian. It was on Daniel. On the way he held her children as though they were his own. On the way his voice softened when he spoke to her, even when she had no strength left. And on the truth she had nearly missed. Once long ago, before Adrian ever claimed her, Daniel had felt something for her. And maybe, just maybe, he still did. Her heart pounded. She closed her eyes, but sleep never came. Because for the first time, she wondered if fate had made a mistake. The mansion seemed quieter with every passing day, the kind of silence that pressed against the skin and made every creak of the floorboards sound like thunder. Amara walked the halls with her twins nestled close, her slippers brushing against the rugs. She had imagined a home full of laughter, of Adrian's voice mingling with hers, of children's giggles echoing in the vast space. Instead, the house was an echo chamber of what was missing. And she was so tired. Her body ached in ways no one had warned her about. Her heart ached more. On Friday evening, Adrian announced they would host a dinner for key allies. Amara's stomach clenched the moment he said it. "I just gave birth," she protested. "I can't." "It won't be much work for you," Adrian interrupted, already scrolling on his phone. "Just sit there, smile. Let them see the picture of family perfection. It's good for business." She stared at him, disbelief burning through her exhaustion. "I'm not a prop." He glanced up briefly, his expression cool. "You're my wife." You knew what that entailed. Her chest hollowed. The night of the dinner, Amara dressed in a soft navy gown, her body still tender beneath the fabric. She wore pearls Adrian's assistant had chosen, not because he asked her preference, but because they photographed well. The guests arrived, men in dark suits, women in glittering dresses, conversations brimming with numbers and deals. Adrian beamed at them, ushering them in, his charm polished and sharp. Amara sat at his side, smiling faintly, her hands trembling under the table. The twins remained upstairs in the care of the nanny. Halfway through the evening, she excused herself, her body screaming for rest. Adrian barely noticed. But Daniel did. He followed discreetly, catching up to her near the staircase. "You don't look well," he murmured. She forced a smile. "I'm fine." He shook his head, his voice low, steady. "No, you're not." Her throat tightened, tears threatening. She gripped the banister. "I feel like I don't exist to him." Daniel's jaw flexed. He wanted to say more, wanted to rip apart the silence she was trapped in, but the sound of Adrian's laugh from the dining room stopped him. He exhaled slowly, restraining himself. "Go rest," he said softly. "I'll handle the rest of the night." And he did. While Adrian entertained, Daniel quietly made sure the guests' needs were met, the wine glasses filled, the conversation smooth. No one noticed Adrian's wife had vanished, because Daniel carried the weight without drawing attention. Amara, lying in bed upstairs, noticed. That night, after the guests had left, Adrian never came to bed. He stayed in his office, poring over documents, a cigar smoldering in the ashtray. Amara lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the twins' soft breaths filling the room. Her body longed for comfort, for the presence of a man who cared. But her husband was a ghost that only appeared when it served him. She rose quietly, wrapping herself in a robe, and wandered down the hall to the nursery. The sight stopped her in her tracks. Daniel was there. Again. He sat in the rocking chair, her daughter nestled against his chest, fast asleep. His eyes were closed, his chin resting lightly against the baby's hair. His arms cradled her as though the child was made of spun glass, his chest rising and falling in sync with her tiny breaths. Amara pressed a hand against her lips to hold back the sob. He stirred slightly, sensing her presence. His eyes opened, meeting hers across the dimly lit room. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he whispered, careful not to wake the baby. She wouldn't settle. I didn't want her to cry alone. Her throat burned. You always know what they need. His gaze softened, something unspoken passing between them. He didn't answer, but he didn't need to. The truth hung heavy in the air. He wanted to know. He wanted to be here. 2 days later, Adrian left for a weekend retreat with investors. He kissed Amara's cheek briefly at the door, his suitcase in hand. I'll be back Monday, he said lightly. She blinked at him, her voice catching. They'll be 2 weeks old on Sunday. He paused only for a second, then smiled faintly. We'll celebrate when I'm back. And he was gone. The front door closed. Silence rushed in. Amara stood frozen, her arms wrapped around herself, tears threatening to spill. Daniel appeared from the hall, having overheard. His eyes darkened, his jaw set. But when he looked at her, his expression softened. I'll stay, he said simply. She nodded, unable to speak, tears finally breaking free. That weekend, Daniel became more than just a helper. He was there. He warmed bottles, changed diapers, soothed cries in the middle of the night. He laughed softly when the twins gripped his fingers, whispered promises they couldn't yet understand. And Amara watched, her heart torn open. Every time Adrian missed a milestone, Daniel was there. Every smile, every coo, every moment of wonder, Daniel witnessed it, not her husband. On Sunday morning, as the twins stirred awake, Daniel leaned over the crib, his voice low and full of awe. Happy 2 weeks, little ones. Amara stood in the doorway, her hand pressed to her chest, her tears flowing freely. The contrast was undeniable. Adrian had abandoned them in every way that mattered. And Daniel, her husband's cousin, his business partner, the man who had once loved her silently, was the one standing beside her now. That night, after the twins were asleep, Amara sat in the nursery with Daniel. The storm outside rattled the windows, but the room was warm with the glow of the lamp. She looked at him, her voice trembling. Do you ever wonder if life made a mistake? If things should have been different? Daniel's eyes locked with hers, raw and unguarded. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then softly, every day. Her breath caught. Her heart pounded in her chest, torn between guilt and longing, between what was forbidden and what already felt inevitable. For the first time, She admitted it to herself. She wasn't just grateful for Daniel's presence. She needed it. And the spark between them had become a flame she could no longer deny. If you were Amara, could you still stay loyal to Adrian despite his abandonment, or would you let your heart drift toward the man who's truly there for you? Comment below. Your perspective might surprise someone else reading. The days after Adrian's return from his investor retreat were painted in a strange duality. His presence loomed like a shadow, but his absence, in every way that mattered, was just as sharp. He carried with him the scent of cigars and expensive scotch, his briefcase heavy with contracts, his voice clipped when he addressed Amara. "You've been managing well," he said one evening, glancing at the twins from a distance as though they were fine art pieces, not living, breathing children. Amara forced a nod, though her chest tightened at the casual way he spoke, as if fatherhood were something to be observed, not lived. "They're growing fast." "Good," he replied, already turning back to his phone. "Healthy children reflect well on the family. Investors like stability." Her heart sank with the weight of his words. Stability. He reduced their existence to leverage. Across the room, Daniel stood quietly near the fireplace, his jaw clenched. He said nothing, but his eyes burned with what he didn't speak. That night, Amara retreated early to the nursery, unable to bear the weight of Adrian's detachment. She sank into the rocking chair, cradling her son as the hush of the lamp's glow wrapped around her. Daniel entered silently, as though drawn by some unseen thread. He lingered near the crib, careful not to intrude. "You don't have to stay," she whispered, her voice thick with exhaustion. "I know," he said softly, "but I want to." The words lingered between them, heavier than either intended. Her heart skipped. She looked down quickly at the baby, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "They settle better with you. It's unfair how good you are at this." He chuckled under his breath, though it carried no joy. "Unfair." "Yes." Her voice softened. "Unfair that Adrian can't see what he's missing. That you make it look so easy." Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to reach for her, to close the distance that had been screaming at him for weeks. But instead, he stepped back, swallowing the ache. "Don't," he said, almost too sharply. Her eyes flicked up, startled. "Don't what?" "Don't compare me to him." His voice broke despite his effort to keep it even. "It's not fair to either of us." She stared at him, words trapped in her throat. He exhaled, shaking his head. "You're his wife. And I'm his cousin. Whatever I do here, it's just helping. Nothing more." But even as he said it, both of them knew it wasn't true. 2 mornings later, Adrian decided suddenly that he would attend the twins' checkup. Amara almost didn't believe him at first. "You want to come?" she asked, carefully buttoning her daughter's tiny sweater. He raised an eyebrow. "Of course. Appearances matter. People notice when I'm absent." The words sliced deeper than he knew. At the clinic, Amara held the twins close while Adrian sat with his phone, his hand tapping impatiently against his knee. Daniel, as usual, had driven them, but he lingered outside, giving them the semblance of privacy. When the doctor congratulated Amara on the baby's healthy growth, Adrian smiled faintly, but the smile never reached his eyes. "Well done," he said, as if she'd accomplished a quarterly target. On the ride back, Amara pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the car window, her throat tight. Daniel's hands tightened around the steering wheel, his knuckles white, but he kept silent. Adrian didn't notice either of them. Later that week, the storm broke. Not in lightning or thunder, but in silence so loud it rattled through the house. Amara found Daniel in the garden, the night air crisp around them. He had been pacing, his tie loosened, his hair slightly disheveled. He looked different, less polished, more raw. She hesitated in the doorway before stepping out. "You've been avoiding me." His jaw clenched. He looked at her, pain flickering across his features. "I have to." "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Because we both feel it." The words slipped out before she could stop them. The truth laid bare in the moonlight. Daniel's chest rose sharply. For a moment, he looked as though he would deny it. But then his shoulders slumped, defeated. "Yes," he whispered. "Because we both feel it." Her eyes filled with tears. "Then why does it feel like we're both pretending it doesn't exist?" He stepped closer, then stopped himself, his fists clenched at his sides. "Because it can't exist. You're bound to him. And his voice broke. "I owe him everything." Her heart twisted. "Do you? Or do you just think you do?" Silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. At last, Daniel shook his head and turned away, his voice hoarse. "Don't make me choose, Amara. Because if you do, I don't know if I'll walk away." She stood frozen, her tears falling freely, the truth burning between them, unanswered. That night, Amara lay awake in her bed, Adrian steady, in different breaths beside her. Her heart, however, was elsewhere, in the garden under the moonlight, in the unsaid words that had left her trembling. She pressed a hand against her lips, as if to hold in the longing that threatened to destroy her. Resistance was the only thing keeping her world from shattering. But every day, every moment with Daniel, that resistance felt thinner. And she knew something had to break. The morning after their confrontation in the garden, Amara woke with a heaviness she couldn't shake. She dressed slowly, careful not to disturb the twins, who were bundled against each other in their crib. Adrian had already left. The scent of his cologne lingered faintly in the air like a ghost she hadn't invited. She lingered at the nursery door, watching her children's tiny chests rise and fall, and the memory of Daniel's words carved into her like scripture. "Don't make me choose. Because if you do, I don't know if I'll walk away." Her heart rebelled against her mind, whispering dangerous things. At breakfast, Daniel joined her. His sleeves were rolled, his tie absent, and though his movements were efficient as always, his eyes didn't meet hers. Amara poured tea into her cup with a trembling hand. "You didn't come by last night." "I thought it was best," he said, his tone clipped, neutral. "Best for who?" He looked up finally, and in that brief moment his restraint cracked. His gaze burned, aching with all the things he wasn't saying. Then, just as quickly, he dropped his eyes. "Best for everyone." Her throat tightened. She wanted to scream at him, to demand why he insisted on carrying everyone's burden but his own heart. Instead, she sipped her tea and let the silence stretch. Later that day, Adrian returned from a meeting in the city, his mood brisk, his words sharp. He found Amara in the nursery, Daniel by her side as they carefully folded the twins' clothes. "You're here again," Adrian said to Daniel with a thin smile, his eyes cold. Daniel straightened. "Just helping Amara." Adrian's gaze lingered, a flicker of something unreadable passing through his eyes. Then he chuckled and dismissed it. "Good. I need you sharp for the expansion meeting tomorrow. Don't wear yourself out playing house." Amara flinched, but Daniel didn't respond. His jaw tightened though, and Amara saw it, the restraint, the simmer beneath his calm exterior. After Adrian left, Amara exhaled shakily. How can he say that? About his own children. Daniel rubbed a hand over his face, the tension in his body palpable. Because he doesn't see what he's losing. Her chest ached. She reached for one of the folded blankets, just to keep her hands busy. "And you," she whispered. He froze. "Do you see it?" she asked, her voice trembling. His eyes met hers, dark and unguarded. Every second. That night, the power flickered out during a storm. The house fell into shadow, thunder rolling through the walls. The twins stirred, whimpering at the sudden darkness. Amara rushed to their room, and Daniel was already there, lighting a candle, his hand steady as he soothed the babies. Their faces glowed in the soft light, shadows dancing around them. When the twins finally settled, Amara turned, her heart pounding. The air between her and Daniel felt electric, charged with all the unspoken words they had both buried. The storm outside cracked loud, shaking the windows. She startled, and without thinking, Daniel's hand caught hers. Her breath caught. She didn't pull away. For a heartbeat, they stood like that, her hand in his, the candlelight flickering against their faces, the silence between them louder than thunder. "Amara," he whispered, her name breaking on his lips. She stepped closer, her body betraying her mind. "Daniel." The moment stretched, unbearable, inevitable. His hand tightened slightly on hers, their faces so close she could feel the warmth of his breath. But then, as if reality itself snapped back, Daniel let go. He stepped back, his chest heaving. "I can't," he rasped. "Not while he's still your husband." Her tears blurred the candlelight. She turned away, pressing her hand to her mouth to stifle the sob. Daniel stood in the shadows, trembling with the weight of what he denied himself. The storm raged on, but inside, the greater storm was the one neither dared unleash. When the power returned hours later, the house glowed again, but nothing between them had dimmed. If anything, the resistance was breaking. Both knew it. Both feared it. Both longed for the moment when they would finally stop pretending. But for now, they clung to restraint like a lifeline, even as it frayed beneath their grasp. The days blurred, stitched together by sleepless nights, muted mornings, and a fragile truce of silence. Amara avoided Daniel when she could, fearing the pull she felt whenever his eyes lingered on her. Daniel, in turn, busied himself with work, burying his desire beneath meetings, numbers, and loyalty to a man who didn't deserve it. But tension lived in the walls. It hummed in every glance, every breath they tried not to share. Resistance was becoming its own kind of torment. On Thursday, Adrian left again. A conference in Milan, he called it, though Amara no longer believed the specifics mattered. She stood at the doorway with the twins in her arms as he kissed her cheek mechanically, the same way he might sign a contract. "Don't wait up," he said lightly. She forced a smile, holding back the anger pressing against her ribs. "We never do." He didn't catch the sting in her words. Or maybe he did and simply didn't care. The door shut, and the mansion exhaled. That evening, Daniel found her in the library, curled up in the armchair with a book open but unread on her lap. The fire burned low, shadows flickering across her tired face. "You're not resting," he said softly. She looked up, startled, then sighed. "Rest doesn't come easy anymore." He crossed the room, hesitating before sitting across from her. The silence stretched, but it wasn't empty. It was thick with things unspoken. Finally, she whispered, "Sometimes I feel like I'm disappearing. Like I could scream and he wouldn't even hear me." Daniel's jaw flexed. His hands gripped the arms of the chair as if to keep himself steady. "I hear you." Her chest tightened. She looked at him, really looked at him, and the world seemed to tilt. "You always do," she murmured. The fire popped, the sound sharp in the quiet. Amara closed her book and set it aside, her hands trembling. "Do you ever wonder?" Her voice faltered. She swallowed hard. "Do you ever wonder what life would have been like if—" "Don't," Daniel cut in, his voice rough. Her eyes filled, but she pressed on. "If you had met me first?" Silence. Daniel froze, his breath caught in his throat. The pain in his eyes was answer enough, but the words slipped out anyway, raw and unwilling. I did. Her heart stopped. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his voice breaking with confession. I saw you first, Amara. At that charity gala in New York. You wore green. I was going to introduce myself, but then, he closed his eyes, grief flashing across his face. Then Adrian got to you first. And once he wanted you, I couldn't. He was my cousin. My partner. I couldn't. Her breath trembled. You never said. How could I?